I chose this place not just to escape. I chose to go to a place. I didn't choose to leave a place. I'm sad that I left the place. I'm sad that the place that I left isn't really how I knew it to be the last few decades. Like, it's really changed. Going back to Alaska between these 6-month assignments in New Zealand has been really interesting. And it always just feels a little worn, a little run down, like I'm not quite some of my fond feelings. I had to reach harder to find them. Get out in nature, I find it again. But the people part, it just feels hard. And here I found a place that I genuinely loved learning about all these new and completely unique plants and animals and the cultures and the people and the challenges of a new system.
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. The purpose of this podcast is to tell the stories of Alaskans of interest and importance. Today's episode is part of an ongoing series called Leaving America, about Alaskans who have moved out of the country. Dr. Kathy McCue is an emergency medicine physician who first came to Alaska in 1999. She lived for 6 weeks in Dillingham's hospital as her final medical school rotation. She decided then that Alaska was where she wanted to be, and after her emergency medicine residency, she moved to Anchorage, where for 2 decades she staffed our ERs, mainly at the Alaska Native Medical Center, but also at Providence. It was there in 2003 that she took care of Dan Bigley when he was medevaced in after a horrendous bear attack on the Kenai Peninsula. In his book, Beyond the Bear, How I Learned to Live and Love Again After Being Blinded by a Bear, Dan wrote of the amazing care he received from today's guest that ultimately saved his life. Dr. McCue moved her family in 2021 to New Zealand for an 18-month adventure. But then in August of this year, she decided to move her family back to New Zealand permanently. Dr. Kathy McCue, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Tell us about your early life. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Batavia, Ohio, which is a little town outside of Cincinnati. So in a county that was proud to be the westernmost county of Appalachia. My dad was a small town lawyer, and my mom trained initially as a teacher, and she raised kids and did substitute teaching. And then after they split up, she went to nursing school. And that's probably where I first got my first personal taste of what it's like to do medicine.
Do you remember when you first thought that you might want to be a doctor?
I never thought I wanted to be a doctor. I lived in this little town like of 1,800 people, and I went to a private college prep school from kindergarten to 12th grade. And half of the people there seemed like their parents were like bigwigs in business, or they were lots and lots of doctors. And I was always a little taken aback by just how irresponsible and how they didn't realize what they had. I didn't want to be a doctor because I didn't ever want to have kids that were like those kids.
Were they entitled? Is that what you mean? Like they were just like entitled rich kids?
Yeah. Yeah. I was the country kid. I was the kid who had to learn not to have an accent and say the word all, which all has an R in it, I think, when you change all in your car. And I really made efforts to not sound like that. But that's who I am. I really feel like you have to do something that matters with your life. I watched my mom go through nursing school, and every night it was always, "Oh, Mom, what did you see in the ER today?" She's an ER nurse initially. And it just cuts through every single barrier, and it matters to every single person. And no matter if you're the president or you're the guy sleeping in a tent in the woods in the wintertime, we all have the same organs and our bodies still all do the same things. And so it feels like no matter what, it's like the great equalizer of being human. I just kept trying to block it out, but I kept taking my pre-med classes and keeping my options open because I still hadn't found anything else that I thought I was going to do. As opposed to most of the doctors I know, they knew they wanted to be a doctor when they were 4 years old and they wanted to be a doctor their whole lives. I am not that person.
You did your pre-med prerequisites, and then did you apply directly to med school?
Yeah, in the end, I did. So I got to university and I was studying environmental science and public policy. And I had the chance to go work at the marine lab at Duke University. And so that's what I ended up getting my major in. It wasn't pre-med, but some other version of saving the world and doing something that matters. And then I just went ahead and I took the classes, I did the MCAT. I applied my senior year of university. And then I got in at University of Cincinnati. I was on a wait list and I got in 2 days before classes started. And I'm like, okay, apparently the gods are smiling on me. This is what I'm supposed to do.
Did you know that ER was where you wanted to be when you started, or was it an experience that you had on rotations that made you think this is where I want to be?
I think that it was the experience of what I knew about medicine because my family were well, healthy people. We haven't spent much time in doctor's offices. And I think a lot of people are drawn to the part where their family spent a lot of time in oncology or psychiatry or whatever. So I had my mom's experience of all the stuff she came home with and so many different stories and getting to talk to all different people on the worst day of their lives. I wanted the acute presentations. I wanted to put my hands on things. I wanted to talk to people about things that really mattered. And I liked gynecology and I liked pediatrics and I liked surgery and I liked doing procedures, but I also like to sit and talk to old people. And so it just seemed like a place where all of those things happen. And it's on the cusp of like medicine and society. Like you're the front line. There's a lot of social things happening. You're not just talking about organ systems, you're talking about family dynamics and you're talking about violence and you're talking about people caring for each other. And I like that part of it.
I know that you have a very famous story from the ER, and I want to talk about that one. But I'm thinking that you probably had an early story that you could share that kind of cemented, and I'm in the right place. This is the place for me.
I don't know. The thing that surprised me that I really liked when I got to New Zealand was the first place I worked. The ER doctors were the only doctors in the hospital in the evenings and the whole overnight. So we did all of the things. So we didn't.
You were like the hospitalists, what we would call the hospital. You're in both.
Yeah. So I had a 15-bed ER with 2 nurses, but I was also in charge of the 40-some patients on the wards. And we didn't have residents and we didn't have anyone helping us. And we had no surgeons at the hospital, no pediatricians, no gynecologists. So if the shit hits the fan, like you're the only one. And there are a lot of critical access hospitals like that in Alaska or in the United States and rural places. So it's not like that doesn't happen. But it was the first time that I had been in that. Thank God I had 20 years of experience. But what I found was like, it sounds weird, but the best part of being an ER doctor there was how many palliative care and hospice patients I helped. And it's weird for an ER doctor, we save your life, but the actual flip side of that is I get to be with people in the biggest time in their lives and their family around them. And they've made the decision that we're coming to the hospital, but we don't want to fight anymore. We just want to be comfortable and we want to be in a safe place and we trust you and we trust this hospital and we're here in our own community. Please don't send me to another hospital in some big city. I want to die here. And to have that conversation and be able to put people at ease and to just hold a hand or shed a tear. I don't know this person, but you're all of a sudden the part of the most intimate part of a family letting go of their mother or their father. That mother or father saying, I'm ready to go. I had never had that experience when I work in an ER where I'm saving lives and just, okay, this lady's dying. I'm going to call medicine and I'm going to get them up to the ward before they die in the ER. No one dies in the ER. It's such a different perspective. And I felt like I'm pretty good at it. And that's a weird thing for an ER doctor to say, I think. But I'm happy that I was the one there. Yeah, because I know a lot of people couldn't have done that very well. And so that's what's so fascinating about emergency medicine. You walk out of that and you're just like, you're shaken to the core and you're like got a little tear in your eye, but you know your plan and you know what you're going to do and you know that you're doing the right thing. Even though it's a hard thing, you're going to do the right thing. And then you walk out and then there's a little kid with a bump on their chin and you have to go play and blow bubbles and then it's hard.
Oh, I feel like you go out of that room and the person that you're going to see is an entitled patient who's like, I have been waiting for 1 hour for you to look at my throat. They're screaming at you.
Yeah. And that's what's fascinating about emergency medicine. It's like real life. You just go from moment to moment and you don't know what's going to happen. And yeah.
Okay. So you saw Dan Bigley, who wrote the book Beyond the Bear, and you saw him when he arrived at the ER?
I was that doctor.
You were that doctor.
It's funny. In the book, it says Kathy McCue, the emergency physician on duty that night, not usually at a loss for words, blah, blah, blah. It keeps going. So I've mostly spent my career at Alaska Native Medical Center. But back when I was young and wanted to pay off some medical loans, I also did some moonlighting over at Providence. And that night I was supposed to get off about midnight, but I was there late taking care of a patient. And I knew there was this trauma coming in from Soldotna. They had dispatched a helicopter and they were bringing in a bear mauling victim. And when I left, there was only going to be one doctor for the whole ED. And if you've been to Prov, it's a giant ED and it's hard to do on your own. So I say, hey, I'll just stay. I'll just work on some charts. When the patient gets here, I'll get started. And so they explained that he had been coming back from fishing, a little midnight suicide run in, I don't know, June or July, and accidentally coming back from the Russian River. He got between the mama bear and the cub. And although some friends of his had gone up the trail before him, they had been fine. He was the last one coming up. And then they heard noises. They went back and they found him on, his head had taken the majority of the trauma. And they ran and got him into the back of their pickup truck, and because they didn't know if the bear was going to come anymore. And then they were having a hard time with cell phone coverage and calling. That's a real hard place to get EMS services. And then they were with him, his friends, for a couple of hours. He was pretty cold to the touch, but he was awake and alert and talking. And when he got brought into the emergency department, we were all ready for him in the recess room. And he came in and we got vital signs. And then once they started taking off some of the dressings to show his head and face and get the nature of the injuries, it was like nothing I had seen before.
Can you describe the nature of the injuries?
Yeah, so it sounds from what I know now that the mama bear basically got his forehead and upper face in her jaws and just cracked down. So from the tip of his nose down, he looked like a normal guy. His teeth are fine. He's talking. From the tip of his nose to the top of the head, there was no flesh. You could see the brain. There was bare hair. There's berries. There's grass. I couldn't find his eyes. He kept talking to me and calling me ma'am. I couldn't understand what he was saying, and he was repeating it. He was spelling his name for me. He was and then you're looking at this. I'm like, how is this person who I can't find his eyeballs? There's just like pieces of skull and bare hair. And like, how is this person talking to me? And he's calling me ma'am, and he's saying thank you and please. And if you know Dan, he's that kind of guy. I didn't know him before then, but I've met him a few times afterwards. But there's no way this person's going to survive. And I'm trying to figure out even like what to do. Since there was a lot of blood and he was choking, we went ahead and secured his airway. We intubated him. And I just tried to be really reassuring. You're going to go to the operating room. We're going to take such good care of you. We got to wash all this out. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And then we sent him off to get lots of scans. And I called the neurosurgeon. He's like, that's not a survivable injury. I'm signing off. I'm like, you haven't even seen the scans or anything. And his, And then I called the trauma surgeon. They said, oh, it's single organ trauma. It's just to the head. We're signing off. I'm like, what? I'm like, he does have a lot of claw marks on his back and his arms and legs. And they're like, no, we're done. It's just face. And so I called Dr. Coleman, who was on call for ENT. And he's like, do you really need me to come in? It is 5 a.m. and I have blepharoplasties in the OR at 7 a.m. I'm like, yeah, I need you to come in. He's like, why do you need me to come in? I'm like, I'm having a hard time explaining what I'm seeing here. I think you just have to look at the scans. You mean I have to cancel my OR day? Yeah. And he's like, I don't understand what you just have to come. And that was the at a loss for words. Once the radiologist looked at it, they had a hard time. If you read the reports, like they were really having a hard time explaining the nature of the injuries. It was such a just jigsaw puzzle of.
So did the ENT do the surgery?
Yeah, he came in. And what was amazing is I think his name is Rosen, who is an oculoplastics guy. He came in with him. And so they came in, they saw him, they took him up to the operating room, and they thought it was just going to be, let's wash out the bare hair and do whatever. But they ended up in there for 9-10 hours that day, just trying to piece back any facial structure, trying to figure out where the orbits were, where the midface was, where to build up a forehead of some sort again. Because with that much exposure, you knew he was going to have meningitis. He was going to end up with a big infection of his brain and the cerebrospinal fluid. And they had to connect the dura back together so that he wasn't going to have CSF leaks for the rest of his life. In the end, I think he had meningitis twice, but he ended up making it through ICU care and getting discharged from the hospital and had lost his sense of smell, had lost both eyes, but otherwise somehow emerged somewhat intact. It's a great book to read. And it's just, I don't know, he has such a spirit.
Yeah, I'm it right now. So Beyond the
I think
Bear,
they're making a movie about it right now.
I have two more questions. Number one, as a former PA in the ER, I've washed out a million different things. Did you do any cleaning at all? The whole thing about the brain being exposed, I would be terrified of
Yeah.
washing. And so
Well,
I didn't know what you did.
I mostly picked out big pieces of debris like leaves and bear hair and berries and stuff, but mostly just kept everything covered with the moist gauze. I knew he was going to the operating room, but there was no skin to pull together. That was gone as far as I could tell.
And then
Um,
I was going to say, my second question is about the ENT and the oculofacial plastic surgeon. Had they sewn Dura back together? I would think you need a brain surgeon. Did neurosurgery eventually come?
After it was a survivable injury, I think he got reconsulted. But he actually came into the ED because I called him stat because I'm like, I need your help. And he actually came pretty quickly. The
And
ENT
then
guy
he
was
said,
like,
and so he was there in person and said it was
and he came
unsurvivable.
by and then he took a look at the patient who's intubated and not speaking and not aware at this point. Then he's like, that's not survival. There's nothing to be done from my perspective, and just kind of walked away.
Wow. What a story. I wonder if Dan's talked to that neurosurgeon since, because that was a mistake. That was
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I tended to agree with him. Like I said, I couldn't believe that this person was absolutely cognitively intact,
Hey,
calling polite.
maybe if
um,
he'd seen him spelling and seen him talk.
Yeah, and I tried to explain that. I'm like, wait, he was talking to me. It's not like he just showed up and we had to intubate him because he had no mental status. He was awake, alert, talking appropriate, following commands, helping us get his body over from the EMS stretcher over onto our bed. Yeah.
Wow. What a crazy story. We jumped over how you made it to Alaska in the first place.
Oh, when I was in medical school, we had to do at least a month of medicine in an underserved area. And so the majority of people would just pick their favorite big city and go work in like the inner city clinic somewhere or go to a rural area and do that. And then in the class ahead of me, the woman had done an Indian Health Service rotation and she went to Nome. The class ahead of us was giving presentations so that we could come up with ideas for our rotation. And I thought that sounded really cool. And so I spent the last 6 weeks of my medical school in Dillingham at Connect Hospital. And it was cool. They had a program there where they actually paid my way up there. I stayed on campus with the TDY apartments that are right next to the hospital. I ate all my food at the hospital cafeteria for 6 weeks. And I got to do so many cool things. I'd never been to Alaska before in my life. I had no idea what I was in for, but I got to see patients in the ED. They've got maybe a 8 or 9 bed hospital. So did rounds and stuff there. I got to see patients in the outpatient clinic. And then every time there was a medevac, I got to go suit up in my Mustang suit. And I was the only one wearing the fluorescent orange suit, by the way. So I think that was me getting a little hazed by the doctors. But anyways, we flew out to villages and I got to hang out in clinics and talk to health aides. And we got to see what life was like off the road system and got to learn about Alaska Native culture, which just all absolutely mind blowing, all sorts of things. I went the day after match day. I knew I was matched in emergency medicine and I was going to do 3 years of specialist training in Loma Linda in Southern California. And the day after, I flew off to Alaska. And then I said, wow, if I knew I could do all these things, maybe I would have done family medicine or like a general practice and be able to live in really cool places and be the everything doctor. Yeah, it was absolutely fascinating. And I got introduced to a really interesting public health system that I still am completely fascinated by. Like how it works is pretty amazing. And yeah, I got to go out and spend like a couple, like 4 or 5 days at a time out in villages with the doctors that were responsible for that village. So we would go from house to house and see like homebound patients. But then we would stay and have dinner with them, or we go check the set nets and see if the salmon were running it, and got to just do some really cool things that you would never get to do as just a visitor to Alaska. Like once you're a part of the medical team, they were just brought in and you're a part of it.
Did you see any unusual pathology?
There was the guy who impaled his colostomy bag on a caribou antler when he slipped on the blood when he was hunting. That's weird.
Wow, no, that's definitely weird.
But most of it was like normal stuff, like COPD exacerbations or drunk guys falling down and hurting themselves or kids with RSV. And then that was reassuring to know that all human beings get sick in the same way. And I've gotten to do medicine in a few different countries now. And I know that's obvious, but convincing yourself that congestive heart failure looks the same in Alaska bush villages as it does in Haiti, as it does in New Zealand or Southern California. We are all human and we get sick in the similar ways.
I'm interested in that. I sit on the Health and Social Services Committee in the House, and we have to vet appointments to the medical board. And we had someone this year who actually said that they went to Johns Hopkins and that they had heard that medicine in Alaska was really bad. And they said, and they were sorry to say, but it's true. P.S. This person was not confirmed. They were not confirmed. But there is, I think, some prejudice from some folks. People just think that wherever they are and whatever medicine they're doing is the best medicine. And that if anyone anywhere is doing it differently, then it's subpar medicine. And I think you have an interesting perspective. You're currently practicing in New Zealand. You practiced in Alaska. You did a 3-year specialty training at Loma Linda. So you were in Southern California. You did medical school in Ohio. Medical mission work in Haiti? Is that, or?
Yeah, for like 16 or 17 years, I'd go for 1 to 2 weeks a year and got to do a visiting professor thing at the Nirbele, which is after the big earthquake. There was a lot of money spent, and then Partners in Health and the Ministry of Health in Haiti put together and built a brand new university hospital that has training programs in emergency medicine, internal medicine, general surgery, orthopedic surgery, and pediatrics. And so I went as a visiting professor to teach in the first ever emergency medicine residency program in Haiti. So I got to see a lot of different versions of medicine, which is eye-opening.
Oh, I bet. What's your perspective on the way medicine is practiced in Alaska? And what would you say to this provider saying that in their 3 years working here, that they just found the medicine practice to be subpar?
I spent the majority of my professional career in Alaska, so I'm biased by that. But I thought we were practicing or are practicing medicine at one of the highest levels. We have a very unique state. We have a very unique model of care, especially for our villages and our rural areas. But I think that there's very few things now that we have to send people out of state for. I think when I started in 2002, we were still sending a lot of things to Seattle or to Mayo Clinic. But after being in Alaska for a while, we really stepped it up. I mean, we can even do pediatric oncology. We can do pediatric cardiology. We still have to send cardiothoracic surgery, pediatrics down to lower 48. But most things can be done in Alaska and done well. And so I'm always surprised when people are like, oh, I blew out my knee in my soccer game. I'm going to see if I can go to whatever big name place in the lower 48 to get my knee scoped. I'm like, why? We have amazing orthopedists here.
Well,
that's unnecessary.
I can speak a bit to that. As somebody who worked at the Alaska VA, we did send knees to Seattle, but not because we couldn't get them done in Anchorage, but because it was so much cheaper to have them done in Seattle. Yeah, so it was a cost savings issue.
That's the bad part of Alaska. Yeah. It's the most expensive healthcare that exists, maybe in the world. So it is amazingly, ridiculously expensive to do any healthcare in Alaska. But I felt like working in the native healthcare system there, I worked in probably one of the best functioning socialized medicine system ever. When I'm in New Zealand and people ask me about how things are back in the US, I'm like, I didn't work in the for-profit world. I worked in a system much like the system in New Zealand, except it was so much better. It was so much better staffed. It was so much better financed. It's what we should try to strive for here, honestly.
What I'm hearing you say is that you want New Zealand to strive to be more like ANMC.
Yeah.
ANTHC.
Alaska Native Health Services, whatever you want to call it. Right. That whole health system, the consortium. And it's interesting. I have met a number of people in New Zealand. This is my 4th time working in New Zealand, at 3 different hospitals total. But I've met people at each place that have gone to Anchorage, Alaska, and they have gone to talk to South Central Foundation about the NUCA model of care, creating a medical home that reaches out. There's a lot of outreach involved. There's a lot of social services. There's a lot of factoring in the social determinants of health into the well-being of a family, and not just an individual, and expecting them to show up 9 to 5, Monday through Friday to define what they need and to come ask for it. But it's the more the going out and getting to know the patient and delivering the care to a person. And that, in my mind, is how medicine would best be practiced. And I think ANTHC understands that. It's hard to do. It's something that they're trying to do more outreach and in people's homes and outside of clinical buildings here in New Zealand as well.
I think back to an article in the New Yorker, I'm probably going to get the dates wrong, maybe 15 years ago by Atul Gawande, about ERs in Camden, New Jersey. They realized when they looked at the cost, it was like 10% of the patients were 90% of the billing. And so what they did is they assigned a nurse practitioner to follow like this small minority of patients to make sure that those patients were taking their diabetes meds. It was like hand holding, like literally checking in with them once a week to make sure that those folks were doing what they needed to do so they didn't need to go to the ER. And it was a massive cost savings. Even having to hire those nurse practitioners to follow small groups of patients that intensively was a cost savings to Camden, New Jersey.
And it doesn't need to be a nurse practitioner either.
It doesn't need to be.
It can be a community health worker. I'm doing my master's in public health from afar at UAA right now. And my project for here in New Zealand is to have the Marais and the Maori Marais to train community health workers to go out into the homes and to meet people where they are and figure out what would work for them. And
yeah, you just need somebody to be able to read the bottle and say, did you take this twice? Did you take this at morning and night? Are you taking this at morning and night? That doesn't take a medical degree to read a pill bottle.
So it can be done in different ways. This is all like we talked about Paul Farmer earlier. This is the direct observed therapy. This is taking the TB out to the villages and watching the guy swallow it every day and then realizing, oh my God, he's hungry. And then bringing food the next time and clean water the next time. And then in a month, he's actually building on muscle and he's getting stronger and he's now contributing to his family. And that's the whole basis of taking the medicine to the people part.
The book that he wrote about, was it Mountains Beyond Mountains? Was that the most famous book?
A book that's about him. It says by Tracy Kidder.
Yes, that's how I know Paul Farmer. And there was one part of the book that I've never forgotten, and I read it a long time ago. But when Paul Farmer lived in a small apartment and donated his entire salary towards the clinic in Haiti and had this very just strict view of, I need just enough money for my food and shelter, and I don't need additional money, and I will donate every single dollar to help people. It makes me emotional now thinking about him and what he did and how rare people like that are. But he really was a saint, just what he did in Haiti. Did you ever meet him?
I've never met him, no. I mean, I worked that hospital that I worked in for a month. That was his Amis La Santé, the Partners in Health. And so all those people knew him pretty well. And he would stop through, and it was right next to Conge, which is where his clinic in Hinch, where his clinics were with the direct observed therapy, TB stuff was. I went and visited his clinics while I was there because it was just the next town over, but never got to meet him.
So why did you start going to New Zealand?
Family adventure. In medical school, in the backs of the Annals of Emergency Medicine, there were always jobs in New Zealand. Now, a wise person would say, wow, that's a totally underfunded system. Who would want to go there? They're always scrounging for doctors. But I looked at it more of a, hey, it would be fun to go do that. And then my partner's kids were old enough and my daughter was school aged. And I thought this would be a great time to expose her to the world, and started thinking seriously about it in around 2019. It was before COVID and was working towards it and getting my licensure and that sort of stuff going as COVID hit in 2020. And then ended up accepting a position and coming down for the first time in April 2021. I worked there for a year and a half in a small hospital in Thames in the Coromandel Peninsula. And yeah, it was mostly we wanted to go live abroad, but I'm not rich enough that I can not work. So I wanted to go someplace I can use my license. And So New Zealand was good.
In researching for the podcast, I did Google about New Zealand's health system, and per Google, it's not considered a bad health system. It was like ranked number 16 or 17 in the world, and on some metrics, number 8, I think, for accessibility. So it sounds like it doesn't meet your standard coming from ANMC, but I guess globally, per Google, it's doing fine.
Yeah, I think after COVID, a lot of things have changed all over the world in healthcare systems. Here, almost 50% of all healthcare providers, that's like nurses, doctors, physical therapists, laboratorians, radiographers, x-ray techs, all the people that make healthcare happen, almost 50% are not born on shore. They're not from New Zealand. We come from afar. New Zealand did an amazingly interesting thing. I was fascinated by Jacinda Ardern and watching the whole COVID thing happen, but they shut down their borders for almost 2 years. And that meant that a lot of people got exhausted or retired or went somewhere else during COVID, but there were no replacements. And the people who stayed here got understaffed, just fewer and fewer remaining to do just as much work. And I think we're seeing the aftermath of that now. It was interesting to me, like how the system works, and that it's completely dependent on immigrants. It's completely dependent on people being trained in other parts of the world and then coming to work here. And they've made it pretty hard to get here with the borders being closed and then tightening down a lot of immigration stuff here. And all of these people from all over the world all have different licenses and different training and trying to make sure that this meets the Australasian standard for care. And they just have really a few different ideas about medicine. What a consultant or upper level doctor does here is very different than what we do in US. And apparently I'm supposed to be more administrative and more supervisory and more teaching and more guiding the institution rather than just direct patient care, which is what American doctors are mostly trained to do.
Who's doing the direct patient care in New Zealand?
In New Zealand,
Who do they think should be doing it?
Yeah, it's interesting. New Zealand has 5 million people, and I think there's 30 hospitals in the whole country or something. There's like fewer than 100 ICU beds in the whole country. Like there's only one dedicated children's hospital, Starship, in Auckland. And if you're in the South Island and your kid has really bad asthma or a head injury and they have to be intubated and they have to be in the ICU, Christchurch is a huge place, but the adult ICU doctors take care of the pediatric because there aren't pediatric ICUs. And then they all have to get transferred to Auckland. So it's interesting because they've got the big tertiary hospitals that are in the big cities. And basically there's senior doctors, then there's registrars who are in training. And then there's residents, and then there's house officers and interns. And I was fascinated when I got to work in Christchurch. We went home at night. There were no senior doctors in the hospital after 10 p.m. The registrars read the whole thing, which is not like the United States.
No. So I'm a little bit confused. So like everything's like a teaching hospital?
Only in the big cities, they're all teaching hospitals. There's 3 hospitals in all of Auckland. That's 2 million people have 3 hospitals total. And there's a big hospital in Hamilton, a big hospital in Wellington, and a big hospital in Christchurch. And then there's some other small secondary hospitals that have training programs. And then there's like the hospital where I work now, where we see about 30,000 people in the ED. Mostly the senior doctors are in charge. There's a few residents. And then the tiny hospital, like where I first started in like Coromandel and Thames, where there are no registrars, there's no residents, it's only senior doctors. And those are mostly run by a specialty we don't even have in the US called rural and hospital medicine. So those doctors are dedicated to being in small places. They do the inpatient care, the outpatient care, and any emergencies. They're not surgeons, but they are very well-rounded. They've got that in Australia and New Zealand, but we don't really have the equivalent in the US.
Have you seen bad care happen because there's not senior doctors on duty after 10 p.m.?
Not really. Honestly, I haven't been here that long, and I was only working for 6 months in Christchurch where that was the case. I think the biggest problems I see here are just that I know how to manage this problem, and I can send a referral and try to get it done, but it might be 6 months to get the echocardiogram that needs to be done to show that you have aortic stenosis and that you need an aortic valve replacement. It just doesn't happen. I am learning how to
Maneuver the
use
system.
them. When I know that someone's sick, I admit them. So I admit a lot of people that I would normally just arrange close outpatient care for in Alaska was someplace where it has a dependable system that I know if I order an echo, it'll happen within 2 weeks. I know it will
Right.
happen.
So if you ordered
It
an
might be
echo,
6 to 12 months.
yeah, 6 to 12 months for an echo seems incredibly absurd to me. Like just
And
a 15
yeah,
minute. Well, it's just because they don't
we
have,
don't have enough echo techs.
oh my gosh, 6 to 12 months. So if you admit them, it can be done inpatient.
Yes. They might have to be there for 3 or 4 days until the day that echo comes to our hospital. They
Okay.
have to drive an hour and a half down from the mothership hospital. It's up the road from here to come. We're to the little sister over here. It's
I
actually
mean,
quite fascinating.
that seems like a problem that could be solved. It doesn't seem like ultrasound tech should be
It's
the most
staffing.
expensive. It's because you've already said it, 50% of people in healthcare in New Zealand come from outside the country.
And
It's
guess what? When you're 50% of them, 50% of us have parents that are getting sick in that other country and are going to have to go home. 50% of us have spouses who just don't like living on the end of the world and want to go home. 50% of us have children who might need to be back wherever you're from. 50% of us left a life mid-career and we moved all the way to a really far away place that sight unseen, a lot of us, not knowing if we were going to like it or not knowing if we were going to fit in. So 50% of your staff coming from somewhere else, it's not really something you can rely on.
But talking about just living in New Zealand and talking about bringing your family to New Zealand and what that experience has been like, can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, we came first during COVID, so we had a very different, weird view of it. The borders were shut down. We had critical purpose visitor visas. We had to go through 2 weeks of quarantine in a hotel where we all lived in one hotel room and we were allowed 30 minutes of exercise per day. We could go down to the courtyard and walk in a circle with the other people. But after we got out of that, it was amazing. We got a rental car and took our suitcases and about 2 hours away where we were living. And we just drove everywhere and we didn't have masks on. And it was really an emotional experience to sit on a beach where we could build hot water pools in the geothermal beach. And someone was blasting reggae music and just parents and kids. There were so many different looking people of different languages. And we just sat out in the open and talked to strangers for the first time in years. And it was really cool. And yeah, we found a magical little part of New Zealand. My daughter went to school on the Tapura Beach School. So literally on the beach, they did their PE on the beach. They did kayaks out. They did swimming lessons. They learned how to save whales if they strand. Each elementary school has like a Maori instructor to help teach the kids about their relationship to the land, the whenua, and how to take care of it. And so there's like just Maori culture just sprinkled in. And there's really a lot of focus on being a good human and taking care of people in the community and being responsible for taking care of others and the nature and the world that you depend on. So there's a lot of the mythology built into it. She did a kapa haka. I think we all know the haka, like the All Blacks thing, but there's also one where the girls and the boys are together and the girls have traditional dresses on and they do singing and the men do the beating their chest and making scary faces and all that stuff that we, I think, know about.
So does she like it? Does she like being there?
It depends on the day you ask her that. Because we lived here for a year and a half, then we went back to US for 4 years. And now, just in August, my partner Dave and my daughter Josie and I moved back down, and we're down here permanently now. And she was going to be start ninth grade. She was going to be doing her freshman year at West High. She has a really good group of friends.
She felt really settled
and
plugged in Anchorage.
Right. So coming down the same day all of her friends started high school, we moved to New Zealand. She played one last soccer tournament and did the state cup up in Fairbanks, and then we moved to New Zealand. And so thank God for Wi-Fi and phone calls. She stayed really in touch with all of that gang. After starting school here, she's making friends locally and starting to get involved in sports here and school activities here. And
where are you guys exactly?
We're in Whakatane, which is on the Bay of Plenty. It's the east coast of the North Island. And we're about Rotorua. A lot of people know where that is, about 1 hour inland from here. And Tauranga is 1 hour north from us.
And how far to drive to Auckland?
About 4 hours. Little twisty, windy roads. Not a lot of straight highways here.
I assume you're on your visa, or does your partner have a job there?
Well, through the last few years, I've come down enough and worked enough locums contracts that we now are all permanent residents. The primary visa holder had to spend at least 6 months of a year for 2 consecutive years. And so I did that. And that's how we figured out that we wanted to try living in this town. I worked my last contract here.
I assume that all three of you were on board with moving to New Zealand permanently. And
Dave was totally on board, and Josie was okay with it.
Gotcha.
Her
Right.
dad is still back in Anchorage, so she's very excited to go back for that Christmas time and have a white Christmas. All this surfing,
Sunshine.
ocean. It's not how Christmas is supposed to be.
I don't follow New Zealand politics. Your prime minister was pretty famous during COVID, but do you follow New Zealand politics?
I'm one of those people who reads the news every morning, so yeah, I do. I've been told by my New Zealand friends that there's a pendulum that swings back and forth. And so their elections are on a 3-year cycle. And Jacinda Ardern was during COVID and became world famous. And it's a completely different way of leading a country and to lead with your heart. And the COVID restrictions
Cost her.
Yeah, in the end, there was a big backlash. There are people who fly Trump flags here. There are MAGA people here. Some of our good friends, she was Canadian, he's Kiwi. They've raised their family in New Zealand. They went down to these big protests that were all very in line with MAGA and a lot of Trump flags and stuff. So there is definitely that element here. And when she stepped down and let the next guy in the Labour Party finish out the last few months of her term, and then at the next elections, the National Party won. So they'd be kind of Republicans in the US, very much pro-business, very much want to slash through the red tape and decrease like environmental standards, the standards for building infrastructure projects and stuff like that. So trying to promote business, promote oil and gas exploration and coal and stopping all the anti-smoking things and having a hard time finding any money to fund the national healthcare system. There's definitely that element here. And then my friends who are here say, oh no, they're running the country into the ground and New Zealanders don't like it and they'll all be ousted. They're predicting maybe there'll even be like a no confidence vote and they'll get thrown out before we get to the next elections, which are next year.
What does politics in Alaska and America look like to you from New Zealand?
Scary. My daughter is 14, and when we watch the nightly news here, she's like, why do they have so much American news on? Like, why do they care? There is a New Zealand guy, a reporter that's just in the US, and he just goes from story to story in the US. Whatever the big story of the day, Logan Church is there telling us about what's going on. And she's like, why does it matter? And so it's interesting to see her see this from a different perspective of why does the US matter? Why do people in New Zealand even care? And yeah, I still follow my Alaska news things every morning. I get little updates from like the Beacon and stuff like that. And then I look at some news from here and they seem pretty similar, the stories that we're getting here and what I would be getting in the United States, actually. But people here, they ask, where are you from? I always say Alaska.
The United
That's in
States.
Canada, so I'm okay
Yeah.
with that, I guess.
You're a little bit of an unusual guest for this part of my series. The previous 3 guests who've left the country, I think they would all 3, to some degree or another, would say that they were getting away from craziness in America. But yours was definitely more integrated into just your professional adventure experience and not so much trying to escape crazy politics in America.
It conveniently worked out this way, but that was not the reason we moved. Like, we already had some connection to this place and fascinated by kind of the Maori culture. I have specifically chosen to be in a place that's 50% Maori. It's one of the parts of the whole country that the culture is intact. You hear Maori on Kareo on the streets. And we're like the last town on the edge of this very rural area of the East Cape of New Zealand. I chose this place not just to escape, I chose to go to a place. I didn't choose to leave a place. I'm sad that I left the place. I'm sad that the place that I left isn't really how I knew it to be the last few decades. Like, it's really changed. Going back to Alaska between these 6-month assignments in New Zealand has been really interesting. And it always just feels a little worn, a little run down, like not quite I remember. It was like some of my fond feelings. I had to reach harder to find them. Get out in nature, I find it again. But the people part, it just feels hard. And here I found a place that I genuinely loved learning about all these new and completely unique plants and animals and the cultures and the people and the challenges of a new system.
It seems like the obvious, easy part about moving to New Zealand is it's an English-speaking country, so you don't have to worry about that. In 2025, do you feel like New Zealand is an easier place for an American to move to than other countries?
The tricky thing here is how immigration works. And in order to come here, you're going to have a job. And they have a whole bunch of the green list of jobs. You can't just move here. You have to have a job with an employer that will sponsor you to come over and on this specific work visa. But they're very wide ranging. My ex-partner, Josie's dad, works for the Alaska Railroad. He also is a musician and a luthier. Railroad jobs are on the green list, and being a musician is interesting. Giving lessons, being a teacher, engineers, financial people, accountants, being a car mechanic, being a fruit picker. There's so many things on this list, but you do have to play by the rules, and you do have to find one of those, and then you have to find someone who will sponsor you, and then expect it to be probably at least 9 to 12 months of lots of paperwork and waiting around for things to happen. Medical people, there's a pretty good system for getting nurses and doctors, and they're starting to do PAs and nurse practitioners as well. And that's a pretty well-trodden path. And most people would work through a recruiter, and the recruiters will hook you up with both the licensing issues that you're going to need the hoops to jump through there, and also getting the job and getting the contract. And that all plays into your immigration. But
for healthcare workers, how fast could you get there?
I think most people are saying it's at least 6 to 9 months minimum, probably. And it really is different depending on who you work with. I had good luck working with recruiters who made this whole process go a little bit faster. I came April 2021 for a year and a half, and then back and forth. I did 2 different 6-month assignments, and then now we're here permanent. Yep.
And I don't know, you're only been here like 3 or 4 months, quote unquote, permanently. Do you feel like you've made the right decision? Do you think you guys are going to be there through your daughter's graduating from high school, or is it too soon to say? Or
I feel like we are. She's still missing her friends and very much looking forward to going home at Christmas to see her dad and just see all her friends. And then I've got a 79-year-old mother in Florida, and I am the only child in her life right now. I kind of had to get her blessing. She's like, go, I'm fine. And
would she be willing to come to New Zealand?
She's going to come visit for a month in March. And there is such a thing as a grandparent visa now. If she feels like she likes this version of our life, that's a possibility. But she's also quite happy living where she lives. She has a chronic illness and a lot of mobility issues, but she's in a really supportive community. Like, it just happens to be all sorts of old ladies who live in the same condo complex, and they drive each other to get their cataracts done and pick up groceries, and they all take care of each other. And a lot of them are like this. They have kids, but they're far flung. And right now that's...
I think a lot of Alaskans who weren't born and raised in Alaska have the same issue of having parents in the lower 48. And in a similar situation with a mom who's 81, who's doing fine now, but may not be doing fine in a few years. She doesn't want to move someplace where she has to make friends at 85. You know what I mean? So if your mom has like a good social group, I mean, I think that would the exact same issues that your daughter's complaining about. No one wants to make new friends. It's hard.
Yeah. Then what? I have a little birdie over here.
Oh, does she want to speak? Because you can speak. You can be on this podcast in Alaska. Hey, Josie, if people are thinking about moving from Alaska to New Zealand, Is there anything
Okay.
that like freshmen in high school need to know?
Don't move.
Why not?
Because America is more fun.
More fun. What do you mean?
There's more stuff to do.
You
We
feel
have
like
more
there's more stuff to do in Anchorage?
Yeah, it's a bigger play.
Yeah.
We'll check back in with you in a year and maybe things will be
Yeah, one thing is she's quite good soccer player. And she's playing on a competitive team year round. And I got picked to be on the Alaska Development Program, which are kind of the Olympic Development Program, and getting to play down in the lower 48 and play against other state teams. And we moved here, and the seasons are obviously different, but the time of year that they play soccer is totally different. And it's not a year-round sport here. So she's very good.
And so you feel like it's not
I
good for your
feel
soccer
bad
career.
because,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't have that same thing in our town of 18,000 people.
Dr. Kathy McCue, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thank you, listeners. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review us. To contact me, email rep.andrew.gray@akelec.gov or call 907-269-0123.